Ahoy! Yes, I'm Rium.
He's just like
name tag. I'm trying to talk slightly more British than normal so that you can understand me, since my Australian accent's a bit difficult to hear. But if you can understand Australian slang, then you know, g'day crikey, put a fair dinkum of a banger's mash and a high little billy, north and south, mate. So yes, I've spent a lot of time on time. Way too much than a normal person should. So this is kind of, I'm not trying to keep this interesting, it's a bit of a conglomeration on everything that I've figured out on Dunny time, plus demonstration of the clock right at the end. So Dunny time, a brief history of timekeeping clocks, conversion methods, and a decade of obsession. Oh man. So horrible. Quick recap. People often aren't quite aware of how our time system works because it's not as simple as people think. So standard 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. Then we have either 28, 29, 30 or 31 days in a month. And there's 12 months or 365 days in a year. The whole reason why the system was developed, though, is because it was based upon the numbers 24 and 60, which are very easily divisible by each thing. You may not often use, a third of an hour, but you can easily say a third of an hour is 20 minutes. That's the whole reason that they think why this whole system was done on those numbers, given it makes no sense otherwise, and it's very divisible. The months were based upon the moon cycles originally, and then they were based upon constellations to base upon that as well. There's technically 13 constellations, but Ophiuchus only lasts for a few days, so they mix it in right at the end. Pretend it doesn't exist. But the thing is, nothing about this is all standard and recurring. People think that time is constant, whatever else, but not in the mathematical sense, but in the actual planetary sense. The planet is not moving constantly around the sun at a constant rate. It's slow, sometimes going faster, sometimes going slower, and then sometimes rotates faster, sometimes rotates slower, things happen, its orbit gets shifted, and it's a complete nightmare. So, to try and compensate for all of this, and the fact that we can't do that, they introduced leap days. That wasn't enough, and so they started introducing leap seconds as well, to try and accommodate for both the planetary movement and the planetary rotation, and they're just kind of winging it to hope that they get it right. There's no way you can predict this kind of thing though. It's completely unpredictable until it happens, so that's why they only let you know when there's going to be a leap second a year in the future. It doesn't matter for anyone normally, but if you're a satellite, 1 second, all of a sudden, you've gone nearly a kilometer that way. So that can sometimes matter quite a bit for various space situations that they need to be exactly accurate down to the nanosecond. So, for instance, this is a graph of leap days. The reason for leap days is because, even again, they say every 4 years. Every 4 years isn't accurate enough. So then they start branching out, going, what can we do? Well, every 4 years is a leap year, except for every 100 years. We'll leave that one out. And they go, hang on, that's not right either. Well, every 400 years will be a leap year. And they go, hang on, that's not going to be right either. So every 4,000 years won't be a leap year. Except over that long time scales, the length of the actual planet slows down, so they're not even sure they'll need that one every 4,000 years when they get to it. So the whole point of this is a graph of leap days that have happened over the years. You can see the actual shift that happens from the actual planet's position. It gives you a sense that nothing is constant anywhere. It's all constantly changing and they have to adjust for it, and there's no easy way they can adjust it. They're making it up as they go along. To further prove this is a graph of the actual seconds that goes on each time. There's roughly 0.6 seconds gets added onto the end of every year, but rather than having a weird number, they just make it 1 second every so often. But as you can see, this is not a straight line anywhere, so they just have to pick it out when it happens. When it gets to around 0.8 seconds, 0.9 seconds, they decide, let's add a second on and whatever else. For some weird reason, between 2000 and 2006, the planet sped up, and they don't know why. But it started going faster. Why is it going faster? So that's that. The actual time of a second was based upon 1 second of the entire year in 1954, I think it was, which, as you can tell with all this changing stuff, is going to very quickly get out of sync. So that's our time system. There's been various methods they use to keep time system. People always want more and more and more accurate. So originally they started with just water falling down from one container to another. Then they went on to using candles that burnt. They were slightly more accurate again. Then they went to sundials. Sundials are great, as large as you can make them, the better, but you can't really move them without them having to go through a whole lot of calibration again. Then they changed to hourglasses, just as small timekeeping instruments. You know, you can keep 2 or 3 hours with a sundial pretty accurately, but you can't use it day in, day out. Then they eventually went to a pendulum-powered clock. This was done around the 1600s or so. Galileo realized, hang on, these pendulums are all swinging at the same time while I'm in church bored watching these chandeliers swing. So that's how pendulum clocks actually came to be. That was a huge increase in accuracy, and then that was that, and it stayed like that for a long time. Then all of a sudden the British government realized, hang on, we can use a compass to find north so we can get our position there. If we know the time as well, and the stars, and the offset, we can actually get our latitude and longitude. This would be really great for our sailors so that we could know where we are. So they issued, I think it was £15,000, which if you go back to the 17th century was, you know, probably $100 million or so, as a reward for someone who could find a clock that would keep the time accurate enough that you could tell position. Pendulum clock doesn't work like that because it sways around on the boat. So then they came up with a spring-powered pendulum, which is measuring its time just by a spring slowly expanding. That gets even more accurate. Then they dumped all of that. They started putting them in vacuum chambers to try and reduce friction as well. They started having multiple movements inside each other, constantly correcting. Then they said, well, let's just go to electronic. Once electronics got long enough, they started doing quartz clocks based upon the vibration of quartz crystals. That was good and fine, and most watches today use them. You know, you can go out a little cheap one for, I think it's 20 cents from China, a little cheap quartz timekeeping piece. So most watches use that. Then they go even more accurate to atomic clocks, and they go, well, how can we define this properly? We're starting to get way more accuracy than we ever thought possible. The whole drifting of this planet is now starting to matter. So they go, what do we do for this? Let's just define a second as 9 million vibrations of a cesium atom. Then they realize, hang on, there's all these other things that start going to this, so we have to start adding in additional clauses in this to make this definition of a second more valid as they go crazy. So now they're up to 1 in seconds. I believe that's the official definition, but 10 to the power of 15 or so seconds, which is every 100 million years they lose a second. That's not accurate enough for them, and they're building more accurate ones. I think at this point they're just being obsessive compulsive. But
0 degrees Kelvin.
So Dunny time comparison. This is interesting. Dunny time is an artificially created time system. I can say this because it is regular. It's more regular than a dunny on Metamucil. Perfect. It's all perfect. There is no leap seconds, there is no leap days, everything is repetitive and synced up exactly. Rough breakdown of some of the time things is 25 protons in a go-around, that's roughly seconds in a minute. There's small hours, there's big hours, and then the only bit of confusion is there's the bells, which is mixed in between the small hours and big hours, based upon the way that there's multiple different symbols of 5. It's a bit confusing, but once you're used to it, it's not as confusing as our system. Interesting fact, this has to be a mathematically created time system because when the planets were going around, the length of a Dunny year is based upon the average length of a mean solar tropical year in the year 1995. That is correct for 1995. That is not correct for the thousands of years ago that the Dunny existed. So it's only been right now that this is matched up. So the Dunny's time system had absolutely nothing to do with the planet's position. That pretty much is said from that. This makes it confusing because everything else is based upon powers of 25, except for the number of days in a month, which is 29 days in a month, and then there's 10 months in a year. I have no explanation for why that is. 29 makes no sense. I don't get it. What they could have gone for 25 and then had 15 months in a year, and then slightly shifted the planet's position, but even still the planet's position wouldn't matter because it was already out of sync. The only excuse I can come up with is that it's a carryover from the days of Gartenay, and they decided to keep 29 for tradition while they made everything else mathematically correct. or Rawa didn't think about it. Take it back.
Take 25, take 25.
Months. The months, people sometimes have difficulty remembering the month names. They're a little easier than you think once you get into the habit of what the pattern is. There's Li Fo, that's the first month, Fa. Li Bro, Ri. Li Sa, Sen. Li Ta To. They're actually the same. There's this prefix of Li, which probably means month or something, plus this extension on the end, which may be first, second, third, fourth, or something like that. So once you get into the account of that, you may not remember the month names, but you can easily tell which ones come next if you know your Dunning numbers, which everyone here probably should. Yes, I got information from Rara after bugging him for a very long time. He gave me the exact conversion ratios. So I went crazy and calculated these out to be more accurate than the atomic clocks can tell, in case anyone needs to. If you need more accuracy, you can calculate it out, but you better build a better atomic clock first. He gave me the exact length of a year. That's how come I know that there's not based upon the planet's movements, because this is only accurate for 1995, not for thousands of years ago. He also said the original date that two time systems coincide together. There's normally a slight skew because they're both counting in different seconds. That happens to be the 21st of April 1991 at 4:54 p.m. UTC, which he said happens to be the original creation timestamp of the hypercard stack that ended up becoming Myst. So that's when they first hit the save button.
What a coincidence!
That's when the first save button was hit. Who knows the other stuff or whatever else they had before, but that was the one that became final Myst when it had the first save date on it.
Any news on what card it was?
The conversion interesting fact that I found was that 39 seconds roughly equals 28 Dunny seconds. This was one I found while trying to work out some gear ratios to see if it was possible for me to make a clock that ticks on both surface and Dunny time. This is phenomenally accurate given it's only 2 gears like that. It's accurate to within 1 second every 46 days or so, which given the average accuracy of a hand-wound watch is actually better than that. So this is a handy coincidence, but I'll say it's also probably the ratio that Gen used in his pocket watch to convert things. So, because I went crazy with this, I redefined the actual length of proton in vibrations of the cesium-133 atom, because I'm crazy like that. So that's the actual final hard definition of one proton and how long it lasts, and that will always be that. No matter where you are in the universe or what speed you're going.
Did you tell that to Rawa? Did you give that to Rawa?
Not yet. Think about this though. As I made me think about this, because I then went crazy with this accuracy, I noticed Rawa has made some errors in some places. I don't blame him because he didn't take into account the shifting of continental drift and leap seconds, etc. But I've now got some conversion scripts. I didn't get them finished completely, but I'll put them online soon, some JavaScript ones, so they'll go on any operating system that has a browser. It's accurate down to quite literally as accurate as your system clock is. So if you can synchronize your system clock to within the 100th of a second using an atomic clock, it'll be accurate to within that. It interleaves between the display of your monitor to even make it flash up on the screen accurately, so it is 100% accurate.
That's cool.
I had to have a script like that for me to use at least. Some handy examples on this 39 to 28 thing. On the right-hand side is a 28 gear, on the left is 39, obviously. Every time one of these blue lines crosses over to the middle is 1 second. So you have second, and you have second, you have second. It's probably a little slow because my computer's a little slow. So that's surface seconds. If you see on the right, this is once every Dunny second as it goes around on this ratio. It's a bit easier to visualize it rather than me just explaining it to you. So you can see there's this red marker here and it goes through once, and then goes through various exchanges as it goes around, but then once it finally gets around to the center here, it matches up exactly again. Very coincidental that it all matches up like that. So, my clock.
Do you want me to stand here and be your...
Oh yes. We can
I want to
I'll be down.
Don't mince too much.
One Dunny clock. I started this year 2000 or so. I'm not sure entirely when. I don't have date stamps on that because I've shifted between so many computers in between. I've spent probably somewhere close to 10,000 hours on this. If I had known this at the beginning, I wouldn't have done it. Look, inside the entire movement and everything, it couldn't be used out of a catalog. Nothing like this. If I could order the bits out of a catalog and assemble it, I would have. This isn't available. No one makes 25-tooth gears because everyone makes clocks for our time system and nothing's different. So, interesting fact, Christopher Huygens, way back in the 1650s, realized that there's only so many ways to represent our time system. So he wrote up a whole table listing absolutely every possible combination of ways that you could do anything to get our clock for us. That's great. He didn't write down how he got those numbers. And what's more, translating 350-year-old Italian in Google Translate and Babelfish doesn't work. So it's not easy. I've had to really start right the way back from the basics. The mathematics involved in the clock is way more than people think. So this entire movement, I was originally going to get it made out of metal by a proper horologist, but to give you an example of how custom it has to be, first I had to find someone who was willing to make the tools that could be used to make the pieces to make the clock. You couldn't just make it with normal tools even, because why would someone need the pieces that I needed? So the entire, I finally got someone who could do that. He quoted me around $4,000 to $5,000. I spent a lot of time on this, but no thank you. So I decided to change the entire design again. I've gone through complete revisions of design around a dozen times, so I'll show you some of the other designs soon. But this final design is much larger than the previous ones, but it works and it takes into account all the inaccuracies in the new medium. I'm using laser cut acrylic in it, which means I can do it fairly cheaply. It would work. I haven't got it working right now because it would take me another 9 hours or so of tweaking to get it all set up with the right weights and time system. But it would work. I've currently got the escapement mechanism disengaged, so if one is to manually advance it, you can see this is the program, these seconds, this is the minutes, these small hours. This one's combined big hours, which is the larger lines, and the bells, which is 25 bells in a day. So as I turn this, it's a bit difficult to notice for the other ones, but everything is indeed moving very slowly as it would. It is all entirely mathematically correct. Yeah. We think you're crazy. So early designs. Some of these designs are a little funky. I started this on a Pentium 166, so I was using the rendering power of computers then. So these are some of the earliest designs. I went through multiple different designs. These are completely different designs from each other, as you can obviously see. There was all various problems with them. I probably don't bore you with the individual problems, but I've got some pretty videos. So I first went with this stacking design. I had some issues with the all on one central dial, but I had issues with hollow shafts that were just way too difficult to figure out. So then I went on to a planetary design, which was going to be very, very neat, and had probably 4 times the number of gears, which was very difficult. So I decided to abandon all this and go straight to a pendulum-based system. This was one of the ones of the pendulum escapement movement itself. That video was made, I think, 2002, so this is very ongoing. Then I went to some early gear designs. Yeah, this at least works. Then I went through optimization processes to fix it all up, but yeah, far more complicated than people think. Then I finally did some actual finished case designs. This was an older case design. It looked nice. I had it split in 3, then I realized, hang on, I can probably get around splitting this into 2 and using even less gears. And less gears means less inaccuracy, cheaper to make, easier to assemble, less likely something will go wrong, and whatever else. This is actually the first prototype I've built that I've been able to assemble. Everything else has had something major enough wrong with it that I couldn't even assemble it to test something, so I'm so glad this one works. There's one I prepared earlier. The front of it, I was assembling the gear pattern, there's basically an infinite number of ways you can build a clock. I learned eventually, unfortunately not very soon, that keep it simple, otherwise it gets very difficult. So I was assembling the hands into a square pattern, and I was, hang on, this looks kind of like the stained glass from Cadish, the cathedral. So I thought, let's just put those the whole front. Great.
You buy it!
Your string broke. Your string broke.
Oh no.
Well, so it did.
That would be why he said that.
Well, there we go. That's not important.
Because it doesn't
Yeah, you
work
can go back
anyway.
up if you want.
Spend 3 hours calibrating it.
Yeah. But it's not ticking yet. I could get it ticking, but you know, I have to put it back in the suitcase and ship it home. So getting it all calibrated just for a short little bit is not quite worth it. I booked this presentation last year, by the way, to try and force myself to get this finished, given I've been spending 10 years on this. I got the pieces back from the laser cutter on the Thursday. I left to go on the plane Friday morning. Yeah, I've been very much putting my foot on the neck to try and get this done. But it is done, and whatever else. So, yes, that is my... My refrigerator may not still be running. I don't know. It's been 2 weeks since I was home to check it.